Hi everyone, Peter here from Flow High Performance, and in this video we will cover how programming for hypertrophy training may differ between beginner, intermediate and advanced lifters. First and foremost, let's define what exactly we mean by beginner, intermediate and advanced trainees. While there is no definitive way to describe an individual's training status, we can categorize lifters into the general groups of beginner, intermediate and advanced. This status of a trainee is not based on how strong someone is, how much muscle they have, or how long they've been training for. It is based purely on rate of progress. Trainees can also move between groups based on their current situation. For example, if an advanced lifter takes time off training, they may respond as a beginner for a short period of time. Let's now describe the characteristics of each group. A beginner trainee can be defined as someone who can see progress in lifting performance from week to week or even session to session within a week. If training is consistent, beginners can usually continue this rate of progress for around 3 to 6 months of lifting. However, it may take up to 1 to 2 years to pass this stage if training is inconsistent and sporadic. When a trainee hits their first real plateau in performance, that's around the point where they are no longer a beginner and now become more of an intermediate trainee. An intermediate trainee is someone who can see improvements in lifting performance from mesocycle to mesocycle rather than week to week. So it may take a lifter 3 to 6 weeks to see increases in rep performance or to lift more weight for the same number of reps. And lastly, we have advanced trainees. Advanced lifters only see true progression in lifting performance after multiple mesocycles. As an advanced lifter, progress is slow and very difficult to actually quantify improvements in lifting performance. For advanced lifters, we are looking at trends in performance over time rather than consistent linear progression. Regardless of the trainee's lifting status, the principles of hypertrophy training remain the same. The only difference between beginner, intermediate and advanced lifters is the magnitude of how each variable is applied. Let's now briefly cover the fundamental training variables related to hypertrophy training. The first variable is proximity to failure. For hypertrophy training, we want to take each set fairly close to failure to ensure all muscle fibers are recruited and trained. As a general rule, when lifting in the 6 to 12 rep range, sets should be taken around 1 to 2 reps before failure, and when lifting in the 12 to 20 plus rep range, sets should be taken 0 to 1 reps before failure. The next important variable for hypertrophy training is the rep range and load that we use. Simply put, we want to select loads that allow us to lift somewhere in the 6 to 20 rep range to maximize muscle growth. Compound free weight exercises are usually best suited to the 6 to 12 rep range, while machine-based isolation lifts are usually best suited to the 12 to 20 plus rep range. Assuming that trainees are taking each set fairly close to failure and lifting in the 6 to 20 rep range, the primary driver of hypertrophy seems to be volume. Hypertrophy seems to follow an inverted U-shaped relationship with volume. This means that more volume is generally better up to a point, and training beyond this point may result in less hypertrophy gains. So we want to train with the volume that results in the best hypertrophic response. Now that we have covered the fundamentals of hypertrophy training, let's explore how programming training may differ between beginner, intermediate and advanced lifters. Let's start with the unique programming considerations for beginner trainees. The first consideration for these lifters is exercise selection. Because these trainees are new to lifting weights, we want to use more basic exercises that are easier to perform effectively. In general, we want to select exercises that make it very easy for the target muscle to become the limiting factor and avoid exercises which require high levels of coordination and control to make the exercise effective. For example, it is probably more appropriate to implement a leg press rather than a barbell squat for a beginner, as the leg press has a much lower stability demands and coordination demands than a leg press. Next, let's discuss volume. Beginner trainees don't need much volume to see maximal hypertrophy results. In fact, too much volume for a beginner may actually be detrimental to muscle growth because these trainees are completely unaccustomed to this form of exercise and may need a longer duration for the local muscle to recover from each session. The general effective volume ranges for intermediate and advanced lifters don't apply to beginners because they simply have no prior experience. Therefore, any amount of volume is still more than they have previously performed and will result in hypertrophy gains. Another consideration when creating a program for beginners is confidence. Beginners have minimal gym experience and going to a public space to exercise can be intimidating for many. The program should reflect this by slowly introducing training in a way that allows them to be comfortable and confident in what they are doing. This means using exercises the trainee can perform with good technique so they can build confidence to try new exercises when it is required. Another consideration for beginner trainees is that they simply need to get into the habit of going to the gym if they want to achieve long-term success. The program should reflect this by not making the program too complex or training with very high frequency, otherwise this can burn trainees out before they can even become intermediates. So the program should be very simple and easy to follow and shouldn't have them in the gym for a very long time period. Once trainees get into the habit of training regularly and understand the process of long-term progression, then the training can ramp up if they are ready. So how might a hypertrophy training program look for a beginner? Let's explore an example program for someone first getting into resistance training. As we can see here, we have a very simple 3-day per week program. Each session is a full body session with simple and easy exercises to perform. The chest press, leg press, seated cable row, 45-degree back extension, and preacher curl have all been implemented. These exercises are quite easy to perform, and even if technique is a little off, they won't be at risk of injury. The program uses 3 sets of each exercise for each session, but only 2 sets in the first week as an introduction to the program. The program uses a set weekly progression by increasing the reps performed each week by 1. This allows the trainee to apply progressive overload without having to think about applying it themselves. So trainees can just pick a challenging load for week 1 and use the same load for the rest of the program and perform more reps according to the program. The rep ranges also undulate slightly each day to avoid monotony and keep the lifter engaged. Now let's move on to programming for intermediate trainees. In terms of exercise selection, intermediate trainees may benefit from mastering the fundamental compound lifts. This includes exercises such as squatting, deadlifting, rowing, and pressing, and their variations. This can build overall coordination of key movements required for hypertrophy training and can teach trainees how to brace the trunk effectively. Not every exercise for these lifters needs to be a compound barbell lift, but these exercises can make up a decent portion of the program. Moving on now to volume. Intermediate trainees can benefit from higher volumes than beginners. As trainees become more experienced, low volumes now don't produce the same effect that they once did, as the trainee has now become accustomed to the resistance training. Therefore, trainees probably need to increase their volume up to a moderate to high level to see further muscle growth. So how might a hypertrophy program look for an intermediate trainee? Let's explore how a training program may look for an intermediate lifter. As we can see here, we have a 4-day per week program using an upper-lower split. So the upper body is trained twice per week and the lower body is trained twice. The frequency of training is higher to accommodate the higher level of volume for each muscle group. The majority of exercises implemented are compound lifts, with a few isolation lifts to hit the muscle groups that aren't fully taxed from the compound exercises. As we can see here, this program now uses rep ranges rather than exact rep prescriptions. This is because intermediate trainees won't see consistent progression every week, so we can't predict when performance will improve. So if the trainee is feeling strong on a particular day, they can push to the higher end of these rep ranges, and if they are not feeling too great, they can only hit the lower end of these ranges. Also, intermediate trainees may see some drops in performance from set to set because they are now much stronger and will generate more fatigue from each exercise. So allowing a rep range will account for slight decreases in rep performance from set to set. And lastly, let's have a look at how hypertrophy training may be unique to an advanced lifter. The primary concern with advanced trainees is health and longevity. These trainees have probably trained with lots of different methods over years and know where their limits are. So the entire context of the program should first ensure that it doesn't cause joint irritation or pain. This can be achieved by making sure volume for each muscle group doesn't exceed the trainee's recovery ability and selecting exercises which don't cause joint pain for specific joints. At this point of a trainee's career, progress comes so slow that it is important to consider longevity so that they can actually train consistently for an extended period of time. If they get hurt, it interrupts the entire process and kills any momentum they have achieved. Volume for advanced lifters is highly individual. Generally, advanced trainees don't require very high volumes because they are more effective at stimulating muscle growth. This is because through experience, they know what exercises work best for them and technique is on point. So each individual set is more stimulative, which means less volume is required for growth. Different muscle groups may respond differently to different volumes, so trainees need to establish what volumes are most effective for each muscle group. Exercise selection for these trainees should focus on what provides the best stimulus to fatigue ratio for them. This refers to how much hypertrophy stimulus an exercise induces versus how much fatigue it causes from both a systemic perspective and to the joints involved. Because total training volume is limited, advanced trainees need to be smart about what exercises are most effective for themselves and how they tax the body. Because of these points, training for advanced lifters may need to involve some form of auto-regulation. Progress won't come at a predictable pace and performance will fluctuate over time. These trainees are very in touch with their own subjective feeling of performance and recovery and generally know when training is going well and when it isn't. So programming may involve some auto-regulation to allow fluctuations in performance and subjective readiness. Let's now explore an example training program for an advanced lifter. Here we have a 6-day-per-week frequency following a push-pull leg split routine, so each muscle group is trained twice per week. The volume in this program isn't necessarily more than the intermediate program, although it is distributed over more sessions per week to allow a greater quality of work. The exercises are based on what the individual finds best specifically for them. The reps and load haven't been prescribed, as this is up to the trainee to decide and may change slightly per session. Only the number of sets and the reps in reserve have been prescribed. A rough proximity to failure has been written for each exercise to ensure that they are getting the most out of each set. Because advanced lifters are so experienced, they have a good understanding of how many reps they have left before failure and will maintain strict technique even when approaching failure. So this program is more flexible and allows for adjustments in training based on how they are feeling and performing. Thanks for watching, and hopefully you got something out of this video. Remember to subscribe if you haven't already.